Alright guys, welcome back again to some more short stories. This game, or at least this part of the game, has been a little bit different because it reminds me of the time when they were talking about the past of Morgana, where we were given like this long dialogue and there's really no pictures per se. And that's not a bad thing. It's more of a... This one is literally an interactive novel, or just a novel itself, and I'm fine with that. It's just, I like the different aspects of storytelling that this game uses. And we're going to continue on, guys. So we got a couple other stories to choose from, and we're going to see what they're about, if anything. But most importantly, guys, I want to thank you all for the love and support you all continue to show this series. It really means a lot. You guys stuck it out with me this long. I mean, hey, we're nearing the end anyway, in my opinion. We're getting there. And we're going to continue on, guys. So we're going to pick a story, read it out, and let's all enjoy. Thank you for watching. Alright guys, and we are back and we're starting on with the story of Defectives. In the distant Hoei era, while the Tokugawa shogunate governed feudal Japan, Yukimasa Ida made his living far to the west with little knowledge of what lay beyond the borders of his own native country. The land of the rising sun was an isolated nation, turning nearly everyone away save for traders from a few specific regions. And those restrictions applied equally to Japanese who had departed the country before they were put in place. Yukimasa was a third-generation immigrant, having never once set foot in his homeland. And for that reason, as a child, he held a great adoration for the glorious nation described by his grandfather. And he was particularly fond of the katana passed down to him by his grandfather. Though it bore no name, the blade had a curiously bestial glimmer that entranced Yukimasa at first sight. The katana had belonged to Yukimasa's grandmother, but she had passed away before he was born. His grandfather described her as a skilled swordswoman, slight in frame but easily able to take down several men more than twice her size. After his grandfather passed, he bequeathed onto him the blade. Yukimasa would from time to time see phantoms of a young woman drenched in blood. She had sharp, narrow eyes like him that looked more like his than even his parents. He felt almost as though his own reflection had stepped out of the mirror to cut him down. Or like they were a pair of killers standing shoulder to shoulder. With each recurrence of the illusion, it took root even deeper into his soul, and Yukimasa grew ever more certain that one day he would cross over into her world. That he was simply holding in his true nature. That the beast dwelling within would break loose eventually. This tale, however, is of a time when he was still more man than beast. Defectives. In the wake of framing and killing two crewmates for smuggling Spanish silver and Yukimasa was having something of an identity crisis. On both occasions, he had been smiling during the act, at least according to those who had seen him. If what they said were true, he wasn't conscious of it, but he didn't particularly doubt their words either. It was in all likelihood true. He had killed two men and enjoyed doing it. What unsettled Yukimasa most, though, was that his initial reaction was, I wonder what I'm going to become. Not a moment's concern for the men whose lives he had stolen. Once their still warm bodies hit the water, that was that. He held no nostalgia for the months they had spent out at sea together. He didn't care what kind of men they had been, or how much their families might grieve over the loss. Yukimasa wondered if that made him narcissistic. The lack of interest in anyone but himself seemed to fit the bill, but he didn't actually feel like he held himself in very high stature. He simply had this vague awareness of himself as a twisted, unsightly creature. On that day, the ship stopped at a small port town to replenish supplies and give the crew a few days to stretch their legs. They were still about 2 months out from Amsterdam, where his beloved awaited his return. What a hellish trip that was, a crewman of Western origin naturally muttered. If I never have to hear the word smuggle again, it'll be too damn soon. The way the whole crew's got their cheeks clenched after that's about driven me mad. Not blaming you, I mean, just how it is. Yukimasa shook his head and gave the man a faint smile. And in his mind, he chuckled about how no one could seem to see through his mask. The blame lay with him for much more than just the tension on the ship. Real job you got stuck with there. I don't know if I'd have been able to do it and keep a straight face like you did. Bet you're aching to let out some steam, ain't ya? You can be straight with me. I could certainly stand for some relief, yes. That much was true. However, Yukimasa meant it in a very different way. Come with me tonight then. I know the perfect place to get you just what you need. The tanned seaman smirked, which was all Yukimasa needed to know what he was insinuating. He hesitated to come up with a response. Worried about Asama. Don't. I ain't gonna tell him. Besides, it's not like he doesn't have needs too, you get me? Some of the crew knew that Yukimasa was romantically involved with the captain's daughter, and the man standing before him seemed to assume his hesitation stemmed from that. But Captain Asama would, as the seafarer had said, spend his time off satisfying his personal needs. That was part of the life of the sea. Everyone understood and no one considered it being unfaithful. Requiring a ship full of vigorous young men to save themselves for their partners, who they would often not see for months at a time, could in fact be considered a form of torture. There were a number of brothels scattered about the port town. For them, sailors were practically the ideal clients. A ship only stayed around for a few days to a week, meaning no time to get attached or cause the other similar problems. But the only complaint a prostitute might have is that sailors tended to be quite pent up. They weren't the kind of clientele a new recruit could generally handle. That settles it. Tonight. Grab something to eat, and then we'll meet up at... Yukimasa forced a smile for the man who had taken his silence as a yes. But he wasn't worried about Captain Asama finding out or being unfaithful to Pauline. He simply wasn't sure how much he could trust the seaman's recommendation. The last thing he wanted was to catch some kind of disease. Yukimasa was paired up with a skeletal girl with faded brown hair, which she had done up so much it only served to emphasize the lack of anything anywhere else on her body. This is your idea of the perfect place? He couldn't deny his disappointment at his assignment, who boasted absolutely nothing of what he sought in a woman. In fact, he was afraid he might snap her in half. As the other pairs heated up beyond the thin curtains, Yukimasa's interest plummeted. If a woman tried to seduce him, he would act in accordance with his base instincts, but otherwise, Yukimasa didn't have a particularly strong libido, so... You're not into this at all, are you? No, it's fine. You're not gonna hurt my feelings if you want to trade me for another girl. I used to have a few regulars, but these days I've got nothing. Sooner or later, they're gonna toss me out of my ass, and I'll have to resort back to back alley quickies to make a living. You're the customer. You've got every right to complain to the manager about drawing the short straw. She sounded like a woman hanging from her last thread. I'm not gonna cause any trouble for you. Well, aren't you sweet? You're lost, she said with a snicker. I object to being called sweet, but anyway, I stand out more than most, so if I make a scene, it's more likely to escalate. You even went out of your way to explain yourself, so I object to your objection. But you do have a point. You're from the Far East, aren't you? Don't see many of your kind around these parts, so it's no surprise you draw attention. You know what? I've changed my mind. Don't ask for another girl. Clients like you only come around once in a blue moon, so I'd rather not let you go. Let's both avoid making a fuss and stay here together. You make it sound like I'm some kind of exotic animal. You're cute when you scowl. You can find out if you're an animal later, but you certainly are exotic. You're not even going to pretend this is a business exchange anymore, are you? I mean, why bother? I'm just the leftover scraps that nobody wanted. There was something oddly charming about her gleeful laugh combined with the stream of self-deprecation, which would have been less of an issue for Yukimasa had he become physically intimate with Pauline yet. Because by comparison, this prostitute would look like nothing more than a couple of dried twigs tied together. But he wouldn't be able to see Pauline for another couple of months, and he was beginning to think this girl might just do the trick for now. Their ship was scheduled to stay in port for about a week. Although they would have to spend some time moving cargo on and off the boat, the stay was, by and large, a recreational one. It was early afternoon, and while much of the crew had gathered together to go drinking, Yukimasa was taking a relaxed walk along the shore. He was no less interested in exploring the unfamiliar port town as anyone else, but unlike them, he wasn't the kind of man whose first instinct was to go straight to the pub. They all jabbed at him for being stiff and tight-assed, none the wiser to the primal urges he kept buried within. And who would have ever suspected either? Who could watch him walk up to an elderly man fishing on the dock, ask, "How's the catch?" with a smile and imagine a bloodthirsty beast lurked within? The man gave a lazy nod in return, adding, "Ain't half bad today." "You're a sailor, I wager, am I right?" the man said as Yukimasa made to resume his walk. "You are." "Well, a warning for you then, outsider. You'd do best to stay away from any back alleys after dark. It ain't safe at night, no how. You know, that warning alone pretty much tells me he's gonna go there because he needs to, for lack of a better word, release some pent-up stress. Yukimasa gave the man a half smile, feeling somewhat patronized by his warning. He was plenty capable of discerning where the dangerous parts of town were, and he was confident in his ability to defend himself if someone tried to attack. There's already been several victims. Yukimasa froze. As in, murders? Killed, deader, and dead. And they still ain't caught him either. Wouldn't want any of our guests to end up in the wouldn't want our guests to end up next in the list. Out of curiosity, how does he kill? The old man turned his gaze down, his face becoming a shadow against the clear blue ocean stretching out behind him. He dismembers them. Hard to imagine, huh? Cutting a person into a bunch of pieces. He don't discriminate neither. Man, woman, child, don't matter none. He's a sicko, a complete madman. And they ain't found no pattern to the victims neither. Nothing to say who might be or who might choose or or who he might choose next. So don't think you're safe just because you're not from around here. Yukimasa could feel his vision narrowing, converging on a single point. Oh, he could imagine. He could imagine clear as the afternoon sky. And oh, how he wished. That could be. Well, look who it is. Hold on a second. Okay, I thought there was like a hidden thing going on. Alright. Fancy running into you here. A woman's voice dragged him back to reality. He felt like he had just been pulled up from the bottom of the ocean, and when he turned to face her, he must have still looked a bit dazed, judging from the way she raised her eyebrow at him. Well, let me guess, you don't recognize me not all made up for work. It's me, the girl from yesterday. She held her hair up in an approximation of her previous night's hairstyle, to which Yukimasa gave an in feigned realization. So what are you doing wandering around out here? Bored? Got nothing better to do? He wondered if the woman was even capable of being less blunt, especially considering he had technically been her client the night before. I'm just taking a walk. Not much to see out here. There's the ocean. Don't you get enough of that when you're out on it? I'll never tire of the sight of the sea. Is that so? She said, followed by a softer, slightly exasperated, I'll never understand guys. But a few seconds later, she gave him a big smile. So hey, you're not busy. Why don't you come to my place? I can throw together a bare bones little lunch. Again, I'm taking a walk. And bare bones is hardly a convincing sales pitch. I'm saying if you want a quality meal, pony up for some goods. So that was what she meant. Apathetic but finding no reason to turn her invitation down, Yukimasa agreed to go along. I've taken a liking to you, she had said. Stop by whenever you get the chance, at least until you have to take off. I can treat you to even better than when I'm on the job, and free of charge. What do you have to lose? So that's exactly what Yukimasa did. Seeing her became part of his daily routine. And the more time they spent together, the more he learned about her. She had once been married and planning to start a family, but money troubles led to debt piling on, which led to her husband running out on her. And with the entirety of their debt on her shoulders, she had to start working, which was how she ended up at a brothel. Well, that sucks. Her husband ran out on her. Jeez. As she told her story, Yukimasa showed a fair degree of sympathy, but took the whole thing with a grain of salt. If everything she said was true, she had a hard life indeed, but there was no guarantee it was. Yukimasa made certain not to be openly dismissive or skeptical, to play the good listener. There was one thing he could be certain of, though. He felt a tiny bit of solidarity in the woman's solitude. The sense she was missing something. The sense she had a hunger. The sense she had a hole that couldn't be filled. The sense that she was defective. You know, we got on pretty well, don't you think? Maybe you could, well, I don't know, take me as your mistress? She sounded like she was only playing around, but still responded with, it's not wise to pair two defectives together. What's that supposed to mean? She said with a scowl. Yukimasa's ship was to depart the following day, and that evening the woman asked him to stay the night, to which he wasn't sure how to react. Don't you have work? I'll just say I wasn't feeling well. It's not like anyone wants me there. But don't you need the... I can survive taking one day off. I want to be with you. And with that, he could come up with no further objections. Regardless of what he did, he would be heading back out to sea the following day, likely never to see the woman again. So rather than waste time debating her own life choices, it would be easier for everyone if he just let her do as she pleased. Tomorrow, none of it would be his concern after all. He agreed, and she gave him a big smile in response. I'm gonna make you a feast tonight, she said. You're paying though. Yukimasa wondered if perhaps what she wanted most was to play like they were a real family. That was probably it. What she was missing in her life wasn't love or romance, but someone to sit around the table and enjoy a meal with. But that raised a new question. What happened after she had her fun? She found someone to fill the hole in her spirit, but it was fake, and the hole wouldn't stay filled forever. Oh, I'm doing something terribly cruel to her, aren't I? There was nothing he could do about that anymore, though. Even if she were to ask him to stay, he didn't have that option. May I ask you something, he said. Yeah? How did it feel when you lost your family? Your sanctuary? You sure know how to go right for the heart. I apologize. I don't want to think about anything that might bring my mood down. If you want to know what it feels like, experience it for yourself. Find yourself a girl and get her to run off on you. You know, you're talking to the wrong guy. I don't like his type of situation. He would not care if a girl ran out on him. I think it's more about whether or not he would chase after her to kill her. Seemingly taking his silence for discomfort, the woman let out a soft laugh and said, "But I don't want you to have to go through that." Supper was a seafood stew. Hardly a feast, but there was a homely warmth to the meal, something she had likely honed over the years. When a man is incomplete, missing a vital part of what makes him human, what becomes of him? Does he lash out? Does he lose the will to live? Does he forget what kind of man he is? Yukimasa didn't think he fit into any of those categories. In the middle of the night, Yukimasa silently slipped out of bed and made his way for the door. Wait! But he didn't make it 2 steps before the woman grabbed him by the sleeve. She must have been awake the whole time. There was no way she could have noticed him leaving otherwise. Don't do this to me. I've had more than enough of waking up to an empty bed. And I'm not gonna let it happen again. Not this time. You may think sneaking off without a word is the cleanest way to end things, but you're wrong. Stay until morning. Let me say a proper goodbye. No, I wasn't. You weren't what? Of course you were. I don't care if you think of me as free tail for the week. You're just gonna forget about when it's over. I'm using you for my own personal satisfaction too. But the one thing I won't stand for is you just up and disappearing on me. You're not the one being left behind, so you don't understand how worthless and pathetic that makes you feel. It hurts. It hurts so much more than anything else you could do. Don't leave me. That was probably what she wanted to say more than anything else. The loneliness that had created the hole in her heart was making waves, and this was the real desire that lay hidden in her words. She didn't want to be alone anymore. I'm not leaving. I'll be back. There's something I wanted to give you, and I was just going to get it. And what would that be? It's, my way of showing gratitude. I think the word you're looking for is present. Yes, that. Her eyes locked with Yukimasa's. She was staring through the darkness in an attempt to ascertain how truthful he was being. After 10 or 15 seconds of glaring, she let him go. It won't be long, he said with a smile. As he walked down the moonlit port, Yukimasa's mind raced. No one truly understands themselves more than superficially. But some say you know yourself best. Others say it's quite the opposite. The concept of the self is full of such uncertainties, contradictions. Yukimasa suspected he was suppressing himself with his self. So while he had a reasonable grasp of who his outer self was, his inner self was a complete mystery. And that fact sometimes sent a chill down his spine. Who was he? What did he want in life? Which self, which of his desires was the real him? Self, 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 self. He felt sick. About 30 minutes later, he was back. Within seconds of him knocking on the woman's door, it was open. She must have been waiting there, anxious for his return. The woman met his eyes, gave him a pouty smile, and then slowly lowered her gaze. Her eyes gradually widened, shooting up and down as they did. I've never been very good about thinking of anyone other than myself. I consider myself proficient enough at conversation, but if I'm not careful, my mind always seems to drift back to myself instead of focusing on who I'm talking to. That said, I spent a great deal of time thinking about you. The woman took a step back. Yukimasa followed. And I've concluded, this is the best way for me to make you happy. She didn't even have time to let out a shriek. There was only the sound of steel slicing flesh, metal grinding against bone, as the nameless katana pierced the woman's breast. Her mouth flapped open and shut while her eyes were held wide open and fixed on the man standing before her. Faint gasps escaped her lips and sputters. Perhaps she wanted to scream. Perhaps she wanted to cry and shout and say this wasn't what she wanted. But there wasn't enough strength left in her emaciated body to do either. As blood spilled down the sides of her lips, she mustered the last scraps of her strength, and with it, she forced out her parting words, carefully chosen and enunciated to ensure he heard every last one. You pitiful man. What kind of hopeless fool would throw their life away just to kill a worthless prostitute? She cursed him as her light slipped away. Yukimasa, however, let out a laugh and muttered, "Don't you worry. I still have enough control to not act sheerly on impulse." Hey Yukimasa, you hear about that whore you've been banging? She was killed last night, cut to pieces like the others. I swear it's like trouble follows you wherever you go. Lord Almighty, stay away from me, man. I don't want to catch the attention of whatever evil spirit's taking a liking to you. That was probably best. He would be safer keeping his distance. Yukimasa gazed idly at the port town as it faded out of view. He then turned toward the ocean, that vast, familiar blue expanse. The waves against the boat sounded vaguely like splashing blood. Can I ask you something, Pauline? Yukimasa said in the warm embrace of his sweetheart. Anything. What would you think if I were an actually unspeakably evil man? Huh? Where'd that come from? She asked with a smile, evidently assuming the question was in jest. Idle curiosity. Well, bad people come in all shapes and forms. What sorts of bad things would you do? How about committing murder? Deceiving people? The words that came from Yukimasa's mouth were not the ones he prepared to say, which came as a surprise to even him. Why had he not been able to say what he wanted? What reasons could he have possibly had? Did he not want to raise any suspicions? No, that wasn't it. Is being dishonest really evil? Sure, it's bad if you lie to cheat someone out of their money or cause them pain, but no one's perfectly honest with everyone they meet. I try to be straightforward and truthful as best I can, but I'm sure I slip from time to time. So listen to me, Yukimasa. Pauline gave a wide, infinitely loving smile. Even if you have something to hide, something you're ashamed to tell me, that won't change how I feel about you. Funny enough, she really did mean that. You got nothing to worry about. Besides, I plan to be with you for years and years to come. You want to know what my life's dream is? I'd love to. My dream is to live out a long, quiet life with you. I don't need anything extravagant, just an ordinary life, slowly growing older, having 3, maybe 4 children. We'd never fight, and eventually, before I knew it, I'd be an old lady thinking, it was an uneventful life, but it was the best I could have asked for. That's the life I want. And what about you? Now he understood. He didn't want to risk cracking the foundation she provided him, the sanctuary she formed around him. Yes, I too wish for a peaceful life with you. Okay, that was pretty interesting. Okay, so Defectives went into a little bit of a detailed explanation as to how Yukimasa was prior to... It's a mix of being part of the main story, but at the same time it was his journeys when he was going around other ports on his ship adventures. I don't know what you call that. Ship rides, whatever. Looting, pirating. I heard he was an exporter, right? A tradesman. I'm not sure anymore, but yeah. So far, when I read the synopsis, it talked about how it's a story about him, about the man before the beast. So I thought this whole story was going to be about him not killing anyone, but slowly but surely realizing the kind of person he really is. Instead, he ended up killing the the prostitute at the near the end, and I'm like, oh, okay, so he already knew who he was, or should I say, he found out during that moment. And it kind of sucks because we already knew who he was, and then just seeing more details about his life, you feel really bad for the guy, because I think deep down, if he really wants to live like that quiet life, but that other half of him, that other side, it won't let him, you know? That's always gonna be a part of him, and he can't really hide that, which is why by the end of his story, you just feel bad for him. But yeah, guys, I'm gonna have to end the video here for today. So thank you all for watching. When we come back, we're gonna go on to Boy Meets Girl. We're gonna go left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right until page 2. So thank you again. Until the next one.